With the long winter here in Canada, as well as the feeling that we will never be able to shoot outside again, we thought we could sit in the studio with a warm drink and look back at some of our previous sets and talk about how we lit them. For this episode, we're only going to be focusing on a single project, but it had a few interesting lighting setups that we want to talk about. The first scene we're going to look at is the opening shot of the talent looking out into the rink. For some context, this project was shot on an ARRI Mini LF with vintage Leica R lenses. As well as this location was a curling rink with a viewing area as well as a locker room. We lucked out on this location as it had full access to a fuse box and that controlled all the lights. Inside of the rink there were rows of strip lights that could be individually powered as well as dimmed. In this shot here we have the lights on the left side of the rink on, and then as you can see some of these lights here aren't actually on. We didn't need any additional lights for this scene because all the light was coming from the actual rink inside. So what you can't see off frame is the actual lights shooting down into the rink, and there's a bunch of light bouncing up into this room. And you could see that with this shadow cut here. It's super soft because it's bouncing off the ice, and it's really giving us that natural blue look we're going for. Off to camera right behind this pillar, there was a full source of natural light coming in, and this was just from the entrance of the viewing area. So what we did is we just took a bunch of floppies and black cloth and blocked all that light. So all the light you're seeing here is actually coming from the rink. The next scene we're going to look at is this 3-shot sequence of the trophy case. This was pretty much the same lighting setup throughout the 3 shots, but we just had to move the key around when we needed it. The first light I'm going to start off is the shape given to the face, and that is a Titan tube that's sitting right above the subject when he walks in, and that actually has a skirt on it, and then that's producing all the light onto his face. And then we have a second Titan tube in the back here, and that doesn't have any crate on it or anything grid material like that, and then we aim that at the back shooting off this way, and this is just giving more ambient and more levels to the actual room. In this scene, our motivating light is coming from the trophy case, and we want to give more output from the trophy case using these lights. As you can see, they're not in camera and in frame, and this is just a key concept when choosing where you want to light from. Before I move on to the trophy case, the next thing I'm going to talk about is the background. And again, we use the rink lights, and we use the ones off on the left. As you can see, there's no lights in the frame back here. And then again, that's bouncing off the ice. You can see some of the ice there and filling up into this room and adding that nice tone we see in the background here. We also had to add some levels in the background as well, and this was using an aperture 600D, and this was aimed up at the ceiling as well. As you can see, some of the hot spots right here. That's actually not coming from a rink, that's coming for a 600D. And we had this at a really low level as well, just to add more contrast into the image. A note for this project is that we had the white balance of the camera set to 4300 Kelvin. We're going for an orange and blue look, and doing this change in camera allows the normal temperature of LED lights to appear blue, which we were pushing into the shadows of each scene. I don't know the exact temperature of the lights in the rink, but it looked to be a white light, which was around 5600 Kelvin. This is a technique we use all the time when we're going for that orange and blue look. We just change the temperature of the camera and then adjust our lights corresponding to that. And the last thing in the scene, we actually had some aperture MCs up in the top. There's 3 sections to this, but you only see 2, and they're shooting down. And we also added some other aperture MCs bouncing off light behind certain items, and then this just gave more levels, and then again this helped improve the motivating light for the subject. For this close-up shot, the lighting setup that we already had took us 90% there. We just had to add another panel, and we did that with using a Nanlite Mix Panel 150. And then we have this off to here on camera right, and then that's shining light on his light side, and then it gives us a really nice shadow side on this side, and we even get some Rembrandt lighting. As you can see here, we have some blue on his shadow side to give you a nice sandwich between the blue, the dark, and the orange look we're going for. And what we did here is we had somebody hold an aperture MC light, and then that was just shining that blue back into the shadows. And then this gives you a lot of flexibility in post when you're pushing a certain look. Now this last shot in the sequence was the hardest to pull off because we have a dolly, a tilt, and then we also have a rack in from the talent to the trophy case. But talking about lighting in this case, it was pretty much the same. We only moved the mix panel a bit more front. So now we have a key off to this side, and even though it's lighting his front, this is considered backlit. And then this just gives you a nice shape between this side of his head to this side. As you can see the gradient that across this head. And that was pretty much it. As we move in for the reveal shot, you can see all the aperture MCs and the work they're actually doing here with the light coming down this way, also a little bit here. And then we had to sneak one back in the back here, and it's actually bouncing off and then lighting this fully. And then this is also coming from the top, which is highlighting the center, which we're going for. And this just draws your eyes right to the center, because that's the whole goal of what we're trying to do here, because the title card appears right there after this frame. Now, these two shots are one of my favorite from the actual piece. And as you can see here, we framed him up with the natural leading lines of this room. We just have so many leading lines that just intersect into his head, and that's where we're drawn to. And then this is the lights I was talking about, where we can actually individually turn off and on these rows. And they're dimmable, which is honestly perfect for what we were looking for. Now, going into the following scene from this, you can see that we had these 2 rows of lights on, and then we were shooting through a nice 16:9 aspect ratio frame. Whenever you can find frames within a frame to shoot through, it's one of the most visually pleasing things, and this is one of my favorite shots from the whole piece. Coming from a continuity standpoint, all the lights were on in the last shot, but now the only 2 center of the lights on. This is something that we knew when shooting it. This wasn't something that we did by mistake. And sometimes these things just don't have to make sense. There were just too many levels and not enough shape going on when we had all the lights on, and this was just a judgment call by the editor as well as the director. Moving on to the locker room scene, this was a kind of tricky one to light. And the reason why this was so difficult to light is because we were trying to light this side of his face while keeping this side dark. And we necessarily can't put a light right here. So what we did is we ended up booming a Titan tube, again with a crate. And what this crate was able to do is actually act as barn doors. So we kind of redirected the light this way, and then it ended up bouncing on his face. And that was pretty much the key light for this scene. We had to raise levels in the room as well, so we had a mix panel shooting straight up into the ceiling on this side. And as well as we had a Forza 500 with a Fresnel aimed up at this side. Again, this is 2 rooms. You can't really visually see where this is. But there's another set of lockers on the side where we had this, and this is spilling that blue onto that wall, as you can see there. Now you can see this is pretty movie, especially looking on the left side of the image. The only problem with this is having something pure silhouette, that there's a lot of noise associated with that because it's completely black. Because we didn't want our image completely noisy, what we did is we had a tube light on this side, and then we had somebody just Hollywood it. Hollywood just means holding the light, and they shot it directly up into the ceiling at a low level, and then in post we brought all these levels down so it doesn't appear as noisy. Now this is the tight version of that shot. We didn't have to add any additional lights, and you could keep it as that as you wanted. But the only thing that we're missing is a catch light. And going back to this image, you can see that this whole source is bounced off of that wall. So you're not gonna see that source in the person's eye because it's so large. So what we did is we added a small aperture MC here at like 1%. And that was just stuck to the locker because it has magnets on the back. And then you can see that tiny catch light in his eyes. This is a really small detail, and this is something I personally didn't catch because I thought it was fine without adding any lights in terms of exposure and then how the image looked. But then Justin and Jason were like, oh, we're missing a catch light. And then we added this little aperture MC, and this is a trick we do all the time now when we don't have that big catch source in the person's eye. The last scene I'm going to talk about is this round table scene. For this, we had 4 Titan tubes stuck to the ceiling, and then these all had grids on them to control the spill. So this scene was just completely top lit. We also had some pot lights in the front of the room on, and this is just to add levels to the entire thing. The only problem is when we added these tables here in the foreground, the levels on the table were a little hot, and this was due to the fact that there's a pot light standing right above that table. We diffused that by using a C-stand and a piece of net fabric and just put that right over the light source, and it worked pretty well. Another thing we saw is a reflection coming from the top lights that we used, the Titan tubes in this case, and that was coming onto the table. So what we did is we flew a flag in. You can't see it here, but it's flown in from behind that pillar, and that just killed all the reflections coming in. And then again, we used the same aperture MC lights in a bunch of different positions in the back trophy case, and this was just to light it to add a little salt and pepper into the background. Then to wrap up the scene, we did some tights with some over-the-shoulder shots. We used the same light sources and we didn't have to add anything. The only thing that we had to do is we actually added a silk material on the top to cut all the light coming in because it was a little too hot. And then also it was giving us a little more of a raccoon-eyed look because it's completely top lit. So what we had to do is add a bounce. But all the bounces that we have are big and blocky. So what we actually did is use a white piece of cardboard. And you can see that white piece of cardboard as the catch light here. So it's taking all that light and bouncing it back up to fill the shadows of his face. And then this is the window I was talking about earlier when we shot the first scene of this project. This was all the daylight spilling in. So what we did is we cut that using some black fabric, and then we liked this not going to complete shadows, so we liked the blue that was filled in here as this whole project was shot during the day. This is the same situation with the silk material above, and we really saw this when we saw this hot spot coming in on her cheeks as well as the top of her head. So using that silk material just spread out all the light and really gave a soft look. In addition, with that bouncing back up the light to fill her shadows. And that's going to do it for this video. If you have any questions or suggestions of other videos that you want to see the lighting breakdown for, let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and subscribe for more.